The dust kicked up behind her father's wagon as it pulled away, leaving Grace Norwood standing alone on the edge of the desert road with nothing but a worn carpet bag and the life growing inside her belly. She watched through tear-blurred eyes as the only family she had ever known disappeared into the shimmering heat of the Nevada afternoon. Her mother's face turned resolutely away from the window, her father's back rigid with righteous anger. At 19 years old and 4 months pregnant, Grace had become an embarrassment they could no longer tolerate, a stain on the Norwood name that had to be erased. The year was 1887, and Rhyolite, Nevada was still more dream than reality, just a scattering of prospectors' tents and a few rough buildings in the unforgiving desert landscape. Grace's family had been passing through on their way to California when she had finally gathered the courage to tell them about her condition. The father of her child, a smooth-talking gambler named Thomas, had vanished the moment she had told him, leaving her to face the consequences alone. Her father had erupted in rage, her mother had wept bitter tears, and her younger siblings had stared at her with confused, frightened eyes as she was ordered from the wagon. The sun beat down mercilessly on Grace's bonnet as she stood there, uncertain which direction to even walk. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, wavering in the heat. Her throat was already dry, and the single canteen her father had grudgingly allowed her was less than half full. She picked up her bag and started walking back toward where she remembered seeing those few buildings, knowing she had nowhere else to go. Each step felt heavier than the last. The weight of shame pressed down on her shoulders almost as oppressively as the desert heat. She had been raised to believe that what she had done was the greatest sin an unmarried woman could commit, and now she was paying the price. But even through her despair, Grace felt a fierce protectiveness toward the tiny life inside her. This baby was innocent, and she would do whatever it took to survive, to give her child a chance. The rough settlement came into view after what felt like hours of walking. Grace's legs trembled with exhaustion, and dark spots danced at the edges of her vision. She stumbled, catching herself against a weathered post outside what appeared to be a saloon. The sound of men's voices and piano music drifted through the swinging doors, but she knew better than to enter such an establishment. A woman alone, especially one in her condition, would find no help there. She forced herself to keep moving, passing by a general store, a blacksmith's forge, and several tents. Prospectors watched her with curious, sometimes predatory eyes, and Grace clutched her bag tighter to her chest. She had nearly reached the far edge of the settlement when her vision finally darkened completely and her knees buckled beneath her. The ground rushed up to meet her, but before she hit the hard, packed earth, strong arms caught her. Grace found herself looking up into a face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, the details swimming in and out of focus. She heard a deep voice, concerned and urgent, saying something she could not quite make out. Then everything went black. When Grace opened her eyes again, she was lying on a narrow cot in a dim room. The air was cooler here, and she could hear the creak of wooden walls settling in the heat. She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced her back down. "Easy there," that same deep voice said, and Grace turned her head to see a man sitting in a chair beside the cot. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his dusty shirt. His eyes were a striking gray-blue, like storm clouds over the desert, and they watched her with genuine concern. "You have been out for a while. You need water." He held a tin cup to her lips, and Grace drank gratefully, the cool water soothing her parched throat. When she had finished, she finally found her voice. "Where am I? My place," he said simply. "Nothing fancy, just a cabin I built while I am working my claim, Name is Aaron Irwin." He set the cup aside and studied her carefully. "You collapsed in the street. Doc Henderson checked you over, said you were dehydrated and exhausted but otherwise all right. He also mentioned your condition." There was no judgment in his tone, just a statement of fact. Grace felt her cheeks burn with shame and turned her face away. "I should go. I do not want to be any trouble." "Go where?" Aaron asked quietly. "I saw that wagon leave you on the road, watched the whole thing from the ridge where I was surveying, was heading into town when I saw you collapse." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Miss, I do not know your story, and you do not have to tell me if you do not want to, but I know enough to see that you have got nowhere to go and no one to help you." Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks before she could stop them. The kindness in his voice after the harsh condemnation from her own family broke something inside her. "They threw me out," she whispered. "My family. They said I was dead to them." Aaron was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the small window, looking out at the desert landscape. "This is a hard land," he said finally. "Unforgiving in a lot of ways, but it is also a place where people can start over, leave their pasts behind. Whatever happened before, whatever led you here, that is your business. What matters now is what comes next." He turned back to face her, and Grace saw determination in those storm cloud eyes. "My home is your home now, Miss Norwood. You can stay here as long as you need, no expectations, no conditions. You need a safe place for you and your baby, and I've got room. That is all there is to it." Grace stared at him in disbelief. "But why? You do not even know me. I am ruined, shamed. Why would you help me?" Aaron's expression softened. "My mother was a good woman who got dealt a bad hand in life. She died when I was 12, worked herself to death trying to keep me and my sister fed after our father ran off. Before she passed, she made me promise that if I ever had the means to help someone in need, I would. Figure this is what she would have wanted." He crossed his arms over his chest. "Besides, everyone deserves a second chance, even out here in the desert." The simple humanity in his words made Grace cry harder, but this time they were tears of relief mixed with the grief. For the first time since she had told Thomas about the baby, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things might somehow be all right. Over the next few days, Grace slowly regained her strength. Aaron's cabin was small but sturdy, built with care from salvaged wood and native stone. It had 2 rooms, a main living area with a cook stove and table, and a smaller bedroom. Aaron insisted she take the bedroom while he slept on a bedroll in the main room. He left early each morning to work his silver claim in the nearby hills, returning in the evening dusty and tired, but always with a gentle word and a smile for her. Grace tried to make herself useful, cooking meals from the supplies Aaron had and tidying the cabin. It felt strange to be in a home that was not her own, relying on the charity of a man who was essentially a stranger. But Aaron never made her feel like a burden. He spoke to her with respect, asked her opinion on things, and slowly, carefully, they began to learn about each other. Aaron had come to Nevada 2 years earlier, following the silver boom like so many others. He had been working as a ranch hand in Colorado when news of the strikes reached him, and he had decided to try his luck. His claim was modest but showed promise, enough to keep him going and to support his younger sister Emma back in Denver, who was attending a teaching college. Grace, in turn, told him about her life before, how she had grown up in St. Louis, the daughter of a successful merchant, how Thomas had swept her off her feet with his charm and promises, how she had believed him when he said they would marry. How naive she had been to trust him, to give herself to him before the wedding that never came. Aaron listened without judgment, and somehow that made it easier to speak the painful truths. "He was not worth your tears," Aaron said one evening as they sat outside the cabin, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of orange and gold. "Man who would run from his responsibilities like that is no man at all." "I was a fool to believe him," Grace said softly. "You were young and you trusted someone you cared about. That does not make you a fool, it makes you human." Aaron glanced at her, his expression earnest. "That baby you are carrying is innocent in all this, and so are you, no matter what your family said. Love is not a sin, Grace. And neither is hope." Something in the way he said her name, gentle and sincere, made her heart flutter unexpectedly. She looked at him more carefully in the fading light. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features weathered by sun and wind. But it was more than that. There was a goodness in him, a steadiness that made her feel safe in a way she had never felt with Thomas. Thomas had been all flash and empty promises. Aaron was solid ground in a world that had become quicksand. As the weeks passed, Grace's belly grew rounder, and so did her feelings for the man who had taken her in. She tried to tell herself it was just gratitude, just the natural affection one would feel for a benefactor. But she could not deny the way her pulse quickened when she heard his footsteps approaching the cabin in the evening, or the warmth that spread through her chest when he smiled at her across the dinner table. Aaron seemed equally affected, though he was careful to maintain a respectful distance. Sometimes Grace would catch him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, tender and longing all at once. He never said anything improper, never crossed any boundaries, but the air between them grew charged with unspoken feelings. One evening in early autumn, as Grace was preparing dinner, she felt a sharp pain in her side. She gasped and pressed her hand to her belly, and immediately Aaron was beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "What is wrong? Is it the baby?" "I do not know," Grace said, breathing through the discomfort. Then she felt it again, but this time she recognized it for what it was. "Oh," she breathed, wonder replacing worry. "The baby is moving. I can feel it kicking." Without thinking, she took Aaron's hand and placed it on her belly, right where she had felt the movement. They stood there together, waiting, and then it happened again, a firm little push against Aaron's palm. His eyes went wide with amazement, and when he looked at Grace, there was something so tender in his expression that it took her breath away. "That is incredible," he whispered. "There is really a whole little person in there." "There is," Grace said, and suddenly she was very aware of how close they were standing, of Aaron's hand still resting on her belly, of the way he was looking at her. "Aaron, Grace." He said her name like a prayer. "I need to tell you something. I know the situation we are in is complicated. I know you have been through hell, and I do not want to add to your troubles, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel." Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "What do you feel?" "I am falling in love with you," Aaron said simply. "Maybe I have been since the moment I caught you in the street. I know it is crazy. I know the timing is all wrong. But when I imagine my future now, you are in it. You and the baby both. I want to be here for you, not just as someone offering shelter, but as a partner. As a husband, if you would have me." Grace felt tears spring to her eyes. "How can you want that? I am carrying another man's child. I come with so much baggage, so much shame." "Stop," Aaron said firmly, cupping her face with his free hand. "There is no shame in you, Grace. None. And as for the baby, if you will let me, I will love that child as my own. Blood does not make a father. Being there does. Loving and protecting and providing, that is what makes a father." His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I am not saying this to pressure you. If all you can ever see me as is a friend who helped you out, I will accept that, and I will never mention it again. But I needed you to know how I feel." Grace had spent so many weeks trying to convince herself that what she felt for Aaron was only gratitude, only friendship. But standing here with his hand on her belly and his eyes searching hers, she could not lie to herself anymore. "I love you too," she whispered. "I tried not to. I told myself it was too soon, that I could not trust my own heart after what happened with Thomas. But you are nothing like him. You are kind and good and steady, and you make me feel safe in a way I have never felt before. Yes, Aaron. Yes, I will marry you." The smile that broke across Aaron's face was like the sun rising over the desert. He pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly, and held her close. Grace pressed her face against his chest and felt, for the first time in months, like she had come home. They were married a week later by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through Rhyolite. It was a simple ceremony, with just a few of Aaron's prospecting friends as witnesses. But to Grace, it was more meaningful than any elaborate wedding could have been. When Aaron slipped a simple silver band onto her finger, a band he had crafted himself from ore from his claim, she felt the last piece of her broken heart slot back into place. Their wedding night was tender and sweet. Aaron was gentle with her, mindful of her condition, and he made her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced. When he held her afterward, his hand resting protectively on her belly, Grace knew she had been given a gift she did not deserve but would treasure for the rest of her life. Life settled into a new rhythm. Grace was now Grace Irwin, a married woman with a home and a husband who loved her. Aaron continued to work his claim, and the silver he brought out was enough to keep them comfortable. He began building an addition onto the cabin, a nursery for the baby, working on it in the evenings by lamplight. Grace would sit and watch him work, marveling at the care he took with every detail. As her belly grew larger and winter approached, the small settlement of Rhyolite began to transform. More prospectors arrived, more buildings went up, and slowly the rough tent town began to resemble a real community. Grace made friends with some of the other women, though she was always careful about how much of her past she revealed. In this place, she was simply Grace Irwin, Aaron's wife, and that was enough. The baby came on a cold December night. Aaron rode hard to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Fletcher who had delivered dozens of babies in various mining camps. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Grace was certain she could not endure another minute. But Aaron was there the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a powerful set of lungs, Grace was exhausted but overwhelmed with love. The midwife cleaned the baby and placed him in Grace's arms, and she looked down at her son with wonder. "He is perfect," she whispered. Aaron sat beside her on the bed, looking at the baby with the same expression of awe. "What should we name him?" Grace had thought about this often over the past months. "I want to name him after you, Aaron Jr." Aaron's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Grace, you do not have to, I want to," she said firmly. "You are his father in every way that matters. I want him to have your name." Aaron leaned down and kissed her forehead, then gently touched the baby's tiny hand. Little Aaron wrapped his fingers around his father's larger one, and the sight of it made Grace's heart swell. The next months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, but Grace had never been happier. Aaron was a devoted father, taking his turn walking the floor with a fussy baby, changing diapers without complaint, and looking at his son with such pure love that it made Grace fall even more deeply in love with him. Spring came to the Nevada desert, bringing with it wildflowers that carpeted the land in unexpected color. Grace would take baby Aaron outside and show him the world, telling him stories about the desert and the mountains and the wide blue sky. The baby would gurgle and wave his tiny fists, and Grace would laugh with pure joy. One afternoon, as she was hanging laundry outside the cabin, she saw a wagon approaching in the distance. Her heart clenched with instinctive fear, old wounds not yet fully healed. But as the wagon drew closer, she realized with shock that she recognized the driver. It was her younger brother, Matthew. Grace stood frozen as the wagon pulled up to the cabin. Matthew, now 16 and nearly a man, climbed down and approached her cautiously. His eyes were red-rimmed and he looked like he had not slept in days. "Grace," he said, his voice cracking, "I have been looking for you for weeks." "Matthew, what are you doing here? Does Father know?" "Father is dead," Matthew said bluntly. "Died of a heart attack 2 months ago. Mother is sick with grief. She has not been the same since they left you." Grace felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Aaron, who had heard the wagon and come out from the claim, was suddenly there, his arm around her waist, steadying her. Matthew's eyes went to the baby she held, then to Aaron, then back to Grace. "Is this your husband?" "I am Aaron Irwin," Aaron said, extending his hand. "And yes, Grace is my wife." Matthew shook his hand, then looked at his sister with tears streaming down his face. "Mother wants to see you. She has been eaten alive with guilt since Father died. She said that losing you was worse than anything, that she should have stood up to Father, should have fought for you. She is dying, Grace. The doctor says her heart is failing. She keeps asking for you, begging God to let her see you one more time so she can apologize." Grace felt Aaron's arm tighten around her. She looked up at him, uncertain. "I do not know what to do." "That is your choice to make," Aaron said gently, "but I will support whatever you decide. If you want to see her, we will go. If you do not, that is all right too." Grace looked at her brother, at the desperation in his young face, and thought about her mother. She remembered bedtime stories and gentle hands braiding her hair, remembered her mother's tears when Grace had been ordered from the wagon. Her mother had not been strong enough to stand up to her father, but she had clearly been suffering for it. "I will come," Grace said finally. "We will come. All of us." The journey to California, where her family had finally settled, took several days. Matthew explained that the rest of the family, Grace's 2 younger sisters and her mother, were living in a small house in a town called Mariposa. Her father had died before they could make their fortune, leaving them with little. When they finally arrived, Grace's heart was pounding. The house was indeed small, barely more than a cottage. Matthew helped her down from the wagon, Aaron following with the baby. Her sisters, Margaret and Hannah, came running out, both of them crying and talking over each other. "Grace, we missed you so much. We were so worried. Mother will be so happy you are here." They led her inside to a small bedroom where her mother lay in bed, looking pale and frail. When she saw Grace, she let out a sob and reached out with trembling hands. "Grace, my darling girl, you came." Grace approached the bed slowly, Aaron staying back to give them space. "I am here, Mother." Her mother clutched her hand with surprising strength. "I am so sorry, so desperately sorry. I should have fought for you, I should have protected you. I have lived with that shame every day since we left you. Please, please forgive me." Grace felt her own tears falling. "I forgive you, Mother. I am all right. More than all right, actually." She turned and beckoned Aaron forward. He came to stand beside her, the baby in his arms. "Mother, this is my husband, Aaron Irwin, and this is your grandson, Aaron Jr." Her mother's eyes widened as she looked at the baby, then at Aaron, then back at Grace. "You are married. You have a family." "I do," Grace said, and the joy in her voice was unmistakable. "Aaron found me when I had nothing, and he gave me everything. He loves me and the baby both. We are happy, Mother, truly happy." Her mother looked at Aaron with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter when I could not." Aaron shifted the baby to one arm and took her mother's hand with his free one. "She is easy to love, madam, and she has made my life richer than any silver strike ever could." They stayed in Mariposa for 2 weeks. Grace's mother, though still weak, seemed to gain strength from having her daughter near. They talked for hours, healing old wounds and rebuilding their relationship. Aaron charmed her sisters and won over Matthew completely, taking the boy under his wing and teaching him about prospecting and survival in the desert. Grace watched her husband with her family and fell even more in love with him. He was patient with her mother, kind to her sisters, and treated Matthew like the younger brother he had never had. This was the man she had married, the man who would raise her son. She had been so lucky to find him, or rather, to have him find her. Her mother passed away peacefully one night in her sleep, Grace holding her hand. It was sad, but there was also peace in knowing that they had reconciled, that her mother had died knowing Grace was loved and cared for. After the funeral, Grace's siblings made a decision. Matthew, now the man of the family at 16, declared that he wanted to come to Nevada with Grace and Aaron. Margaret and Hannah, 14 and 12 respectively, agreed. There was nothing for them in Mariposa, and they wanted to be near their sister. Aaron did not hesitate. "We will make room," he said. "Family stays together." They returned to Rhyolite with a much larger family than they had left with. Aaron immediately set to work expanding the cabin even more, building additional rooms to accommodate everyone. Matthew proved to be a hard worker and a quick learner, and Aaron taught him the prospecting trade. The girls helped Grace with the baby and the housework, and slowly the Irwin household became a real home, filled with laughter and love. Rhyolite continued to grow. By 1888, it had a proper school, several stores, a bank, and even an opera house. Grace's sisters enrolled in the school, and Matthew worked the claim alongside Aaron. The silver kept coming, enough that Aaron was able to hire some help and spend more time with his family. On their first wedding anniversary, Aaron surprised Grace with a real wedding ring to replace the simple silver band. This one had a small diamond which must have cost him dearly. Grace cried when he slipped it onto her finger. "You have given me so much," she said. "More than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me a reason to build something lasting," Aaron replied, pulling her into his arms. "Before you, I was just drifting, going where the silver was. Now I have a home. I have a family. I have everything." They stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching the sun set over the desert while baby Aaron played at their feet. Matthew was in the barn seeing to the horses, and the girls were inside preparing dinner. It was a scene of domestic tranquility that Grace had thought she would never have. 2 years later, Grace gave birth to a daughter. They named her Emma after Aaron's sister back in Denver. The labor was easier this time, and when Aaron held his daughter for the first time, the look on his face was one of pure wonder. Young Aaron, now a toddling 3-year-old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. Life continued to be good. Aaron's claim proved to be one of the better ones in the area, providing steady income. He expanded into other business ventures, opening a hardware store in town that catered to the constant stream of new prospectors. Matthew, now 18, had become a full partner in the business and was courting a nice girl whose family ran the boarding house. Grace's sisters grew into lovely young women. Margaret became a teacher at the local school, while Hannah showed a talent for music and gave piano lessons. The family that had once rejected Grace now thrived under Aaron's protective care. When Grace became pregnant again in 1892, she and Aaron were both delighted. This pregnancy was the easiest yet, and when she gave birth to twin boys, she laughed at the chaos that was about to descend on their household. 4 children, Aaron said, looking at the twins in wonder. We have 4 children, Grace. We do, she said, smiling tiredly. Think you can handle it, Cowboy? He leaned down and kissed her. With you by my side, I can handle anything. They named the twins James and Samuel, and the house became even more full of life and noise. Young Aaron, now 6, took his role as big brother seriously, helping to watch over Emma and the twins. Matthew got married to his sweetheart Anna and built a house nearby. Margaret got engaged to the new schoolmaster. The family kept growing and flourishing. One evening, when the children were finally all asleep and the house was quiet, Grace and Aaron sat on their porch as they so often did, watching the stars emerge in the desert sky. Grace was now 26 years old, Aaron 32, and they had been married for 5 years. "Do you ever think about that day when you found me?" Grace asked, leaning against his shoulder. "All the time," Aaron admitted. "I think about how close I came to not going into town that day. I almost stayed at the claim. If I had, I might never have met you." "Fate," Grace said softly. "Maybe," Aaron agreed. "Or maybe God has a sense of humor, bringing 2 broken people together and making them whole." He put his arm around her shoulders. "I was just drifting before you, Grace. Working claims, sending money to Emma, but never really living. You gave me a purpose. You gave me a family. You gave me everything I did not even know I needed. You saved my life," Grace said simply. "And not just by taking me in. You saved me from despair, from shame, from thinking I was worthless. You showed me what real love looks like. Not the false promises Thomas made, but actual love, patient and kind and steady." "My home is your home," Aaron said, repeating the words he had said to her so long ago. "That is still true, you know. Everything I have, everything I am, belongs to you and our children." "I know," Grace said. "And my heart belongs to you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the desert night. In the distance, a coyote howled. Inside the house, one of the twins started fussing, and they heard young Aaron's voice, soothing his brother back to sleep. "He is going to be a good man," Aaron said with pride. "They all are. Emma is going to be a force to be reckoned with, and the twins, well, they are going to keep us on our toes." "They have a good example to follow," Grace said, squeezing his hand. "You have shown them what it means to be a good person, to take care of family, to treat people with kindness and respect." "We have shown them," Aaron corrected. "You are the heart of this family, Grace. You hold us all together." As the years continued to pass, Rhyolite reached its peak and then, as so many mining towns did, began to decline. The silver played out and people started to leave. But the Irwin family stayed. Aaron had diversified enough that they were not dependent on mining alone. His hardware store remained profitable, and he had invested in land and livestock. Young Aaron grew into a fine young man, strong and capable like his father. When he was 18, he announced his intention to become a lawyer, wanting to fight for justice for people who had none. Aaron and Grace were immensely proud and sent him to San Francisco to study. Emma became a teacher like her Aunt Margaret, and she had a particular gift for working with children who struggled to learn. The twins, James and Samuel, were inseparable and eventually took over the hardware store from their father, running it together with easy partnership. Matthew and Anna had children of their own, as did Margaret and her husband. The Irwin family grew and spread, but they always remained close, gathering for Sunday dinners and holidays. Grace's small cottage became the heart of the extended family, the place where everyone knew they were welcome. When Grace was 40, she and Aaron took a trip to San Francisco to visit young Aaron, who was now in his final year of law school. Walking through the bustling city streets, so different from the desert they called home, Grace marveled at how far she had come from that scared, abandoned girl on the side of the road. "You ever regret it?" she asked Aaron as they walked along the waterfront. "Taking me in that day? Your life would have been so much simpler if you had just left me there." Aaron stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Grace Irwin, you listen to me. Taking you in was the best decision I ever made. You and the children are the greatest blessing of my life. Every single day I wake up grateful that I was in the right place at that right time, that I was given the chance to love you." "Even with all the chaos?" Grace asked with a smile. "4 children, 3 siblings, all the noise and mess and drama, especially with all that," Aaron said firmly. "That is not chaos, sweetheart. That is life. Real, messy, beautiful life. And I would not trade a single moment of it." Grace reached up and touched his face, noticing the gray that had started to appear in his hair, the lines around his eyes from years of smiling. "I love you, Aaron Irwin. More than I can ever say." "I love you too," he said, pulling her close. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days after that." They returned to Rhyolite renewed, ready for whatever came next. Young Aaron passed the bar and opened a practice in Reno, fighting for the rights of workers and the less fortunate. Emma married a kind rancher and moved to a spread just outside of town. The twins continued to run the store, both of them marrying local girls and starting families of their own. By the time Grace was 50, she was a grandmother many times over. The cabin that had once been so small now had wings and additions sprawling in every direction, added as the family grew. It was filled most days with the sound of children playing and adults talking and laughing. On her 50th birthday, the whole family gathered for a celebration. There must have been 30 people crammed into the house and spilling out into the yard. Grace stood on the porch, looking at all of them, her children and grandchildren, her sisters and brother and their families, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Aaron came up beside her and slipped his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How blessed I am," Grace said honestly. 25 years ago, I was standing on a road with nothing, believing my life was over. Now look at all of this. All these people, this love, this family. It is more than I ever could have imagined. "You built this," Aaron said. "Your strength, your love, your refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. You built this family, Grace." "We built it," she corrected. "Together." Young Aaron, now a successful lawyer with a wife and 2 children of his own, came over to join them. At 25, he was the image of his father, tall and strong with kind eyes. "Mother, Father, thank you for this, for all of it, for showing us what family means, what love looks like." Grace pulled her eldest son into a hug, remembering the tiny baby she had brought into the world in that small cabin, the baby whose father had abandoned them both but who had been blessed with Aaron as his true father. "You have made us so proud," she whispered. "I had good teachers," he said simply. The celebration continued late into the evening. There was food and music and dancing. The grandchildren ran wild in the yard while the adults talked and reminisced. Grace danced with Aaron under the stars, moving slowly to the music that drifted from inside. "Do you remember our wedding?" she asked. "Every detail," Aaron said. "You wore a simple blue dress and we were married by that preacher in front of 5 witnesses. It was the happiest day of my life up to that point." "Mine too," Grace admitted. "I felt like I was starting over, getting a second chance at life. And now I know I was right," Grace said, smiling up at him. "You gave me more than a second chance, Aaron. You gave me a whole new life. A beautiful, chaotic, wonderful life filled with more love than I ever thought possible." As they danced, Grace thought back to that scared girl who had been thrown out by her family, who had thought her life was over. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the kindness of a stranger would change everything, that love would find her when she least expected it. But maybe that girl had known somehow, had felt it in her bones. Maybe that was why she had kept walking, kept going even when it seemed hopeless. Because somewhere deep inside, she had known that there was something better waiting for her, someone who would see her not as ruined or shameful, but as worthy of love and protection. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as they always did. Matthew passed away unexpectedly when he was 50, and the family mourned together. Margaret's husband died of pneumonia, and she moved back in with Grace and Aaron for her final years. Hannah never married but lived a full life as a music teacher, touching the lives of hundreds of students. Aaron's silver hair turned white, and Grace's dark hair gained streaks of gray. They slowed down, spending more time on the porch and less time working. The twins took over most of the business responsibilities, and young Aaron convinced his parents to move to Reno to be closer to him and his family. But Grace resisted. "This is where our story began," she told Aaron. "This is where you found me, where we built our life. I do not want to leave it." Aaron understood. He had built this place with his own hands, had carved out a life from the unforgiving desert. This was their home, and they would stay as long as they could. When Grace was 65, she became ill. The doctor diagnosed her with a heart condition, said it was weakening, and there was little they could do. Grace accepted the news with grace, feeling like she had already lived far more life than she had any right to expect. Aaron was devastated but tried to hide it, wanting to be strong for her. But Grace knew him too well, could see the fear in his eyes every time he looked at her. "Aaron, listen to me," she said one night as they lay in bed together. "I am not afraid. I have lived a full, beautiful life. I have been loved beyond measure. Whatever happens now, I am at peace." "I am not ready to lose you," Aaron said, his voice breaking. "I do not know how to be in this world without you." Grace reached up and touched his face, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. "You will never lose me. I will always be with you, in every room of this house, in the faces of our children and grandchildren, in every sunrise over the desert. We are bound together, Aaron. Death cannot change that." But Grace was stronger than the doctors predicted. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by family and love. She saw more grandchildren born, saw young Aaron argue a case before the state Supreme Court and win, saw Emma's ranch prosper and the twins' store expand to 2 more locations. On a spring morning when Grace was 70, she woke up feeling peaceful. The wildflowers were blooming across the desert, just like they had been that first spring after she and Aaron married. She could hear birds singing outside the window and smell breakfast cooking in the kitchen, probably Emma making sure her parents ate. Aaron was still asleep beside her, his hand resting on hers as it always did. Grace studied his face, memorizing every line and wrinkle, every gray hair. This man had saved her life in every way a person could be saved. He had given her love and family and home. He had seen her at her lowest and loved her anyway. He had taken another man's child and raised him as his own without a moment's hesitation. "I love you," she whispered, even though he could not hear her. Aaron stirred and opened his eyes, smiling when he saw her looking at him. "Good morning, beautiful." "Good morning," Grace said. Even after all these years, he still made her heart flutter. "Aaron, I want you to know something." "What is that?" "That day you found me, when you said your home was my home, you gave me more than shelter. You gave me hope. You gave me a reason to keep going. You showed me what real love looks like, and every day since then has been a gift I never thought I would have." Aaron's eyes filled with tears. "Grace, let me finish," she said gently. I need you to know that I have lived a life beyond my wildest dreams because of you. Our children, our grandchildren, all of this. It is all because you had a good heart and you were not afraid to act on it. You are the best man I have ever known, Aaron Irwin, and loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life. Aaron pulled her into his arms, holding her close. They stayed like that for a long time. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of despair. Grace's health continued to decline slowly over the next year, but she remained active and involved in the family. She taught her granddaughters to cook and sew, told stories to the younger grandchildren about the early days of Rhyolite, and sat on the porch with Aaron every evening, watching the sunsets that never got old. On the day she died, Grace was 71 years old. It was a quiet afternoon, and she was sitting in her favorite chair on the porch with Aaron beside her. They had been talking about young Aaron's latest legal victory, about Emma's new grandbaby, about the twins' plans to expand the business again. "We did well, did we not?" Grace said softly. "We did," Aaron agreed, holding her hand. "We did very well. No regrets, not a single one." Grace smiled and closed her eyes, feeling the warm sun on her face and Aaron's hand in hers. "Good," she whispered. "That is good." She slipped away peacefully, surrounded by love and warmth, her hand still clasped in Aaron's. She died as she had lived the past years of her life, safe and cherished and home. Aaron was lost without her, but he was not alone. His children and grandchildren surrounded him, supporting him through his grief. Young Aaron took time away from his practice to stay with his father. Emma moved back home temporarily to help. The twins visited every day. Aaron lived another 3 years after Grace's passing. He spent his time telling stories about their life together, making sure the grandchildren knew about the woman who had been the heart of their family. He talked about how she had been abandoned and alone, how he had found her and known instantly that she was special, how they had built a life and a family from nothing. "Your grandmother was the strongest person I ever knew," he would tell them. "She could have given up 100 times, but she did not. She kept going, kept loving, kept building. And she taught all of us what family really means." When Aaron died at the age of 78, it was in his sleep, peacefully. His children found him in the morning, lying in the bed he had shared with Grace, a slight smile on his face. Beside him on the nightstand was a photograph of the two of them taken on their 25th wedding anniversary, both of them smiling into the camera with their whole hearts. The funeral was huge, drawing people from all over Nevada and beyond. Young Aaron, now a distinguished lawyer in his 50s, gave the eulogy. He talked about his father's kindness, his strength, his unwavering love for his family. And he told the story of how Aaron had found Grace on that dusty road in Rhyolite and taken her in, how he had loved her and her unborn child without hesitation, how he had built a family based on compassion rather than blood. "My father taught us that family is not just about who you are born to," young Aaron said, his voice strong despite his tears. "It is about who chooses to love you, who stands by you, who builds a life with you. He chose my mother when she had nothing and no one. He chose me before I was even born. And in doing so, he showed us all what it means to truly love." They buried Aaron beside Grace in the small cemetery outside Rhyolite, under a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. The whole family was there, 3 generations of Irwins, all of them descended from or connected to the love story that had started with a cowboy finding a pregnant woman abandoned on a desert road. Young Aaron stood at the grave long after everyone else had left, looking at the headstones side by side. Grace Irwin, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. Aaron Irwin, devoted husband, father, and friend. "Thank you," he said softly, speaking to both of them. Thank you for showing us what love looks like. Thank you for building this family. Thank you for never giving up. The wind blew across the desert, carrying the scent of wildflowers. And young Aaron could have sworn he heard his father's voice on that wind, strong and sure. My home is your home now. Those words had saved his mother's life all those years ago. Those words had built a family, a legacy, a love story that would be passed down through generations. And those words, young Aaron vowed, would continue to guide the Irwin family, reminding them always that home was not a place but the people who loved you, who chose you, who stood by you no matter what. He placed his hand on his father's headstone, then his mother's, and smiled through his tears. They had lived a good life, full of love and laughter and family. They had started with nothing and built everything. And their love story, born in the harsh desert of Nevada in 1887, would live on forever in the hearts of all those they had touched. As young Aaron walked back to join his family, he thought about his own children and grandchildren, about the stories he would tell them about their great-grandparents. He would make sure they knew about Grace's courage and Aaron's kindness, about how love could bloom even in the most unlikely places, about how family was something you built with love and commitment and unwavering loyalty. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, just like it had on that evening when Aaron had first told Grace he loved her, when he had offered to be a father to her unborn child, when he had promised her that his home would always be her home too. And it had been. For over 50 years it had been home for both of them, a sanctuary built not of wood and stone but of love and trust and devotion. That home still stood, not just in the physical cabin that remained on the edge of Rhyolite, but in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by Aaron and Grace's love story. It was a story that proved that redemption was possible, that second chances existed, that love could heal even the deepest wounds. It was a story that showed that family was not about perfection, but about choosing to stand together, to support each other, to build something beautiful even from broken pieces. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the desert sky, young Aaron rejoined his family. They headed back to the old cabin, which had been preserved by the family as a memorial and gathering place. Inside those walls, generations of Irwins would continue to gather, to share meals and stories and love. And always, the story they told most often was the one about the pregnant woman thrown out by her family and the cowboy who found her and said, "My home is your home now." It was the story that had started everything, the foundation upon which a family had been built, the proof that sometimes the darkest moments led to the brightest futures, and that love, real and true and steadfast, could conquer anything. In that small cabin in the Nevada desert, surrounded by family and filled with love, the legacy of Aaron and Grace Irwin lived on, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the enduring beauty of a love that had started with a simple act of compassion and grown into something that would last for generations. Their story was complete, a full circle from that first meeting on a dusty road to their final rest side by side under the desert sky. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a family that would carry their values and their story forward into the future. It was, in every way, a life well lived and a love story for the ages.